Good afternoon to everybody here at the Medical Arts Center Auditorium and to our online community on Zoom. Welcome to the Emergency Preparedness lecture series. I'm Joel Smith, Emergency Preparedness Specialist, along with my counterpart Cassidy Maudlin, Senior Emergency Preparedness Specialist for Valley Medical Center. September celebrates Preparedness Month, and today we have a special guest highlighting this month's lecture from the University of Washington Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. We're honored and pleasured to welcome Gabriel Lotto, PhD, here to discuss earthquake preparedness and early warning systems, such as the Shake Alert system. Gabriel has earned his PhD from Stanford University in 2018, studying the physics of earthquakes and tsunamis, and he works to raise the awareness of publicly funded Shake Alert earthquake early warning system for individuals and organizations in the Pacific Northwest. Our lecture today is being recorded on Zoom for access and review at a later time, and at the end of the presentation, we welcome questions for Gabriel. For the online community, please utilize the chat function to type any questions you may have during the presentation. And then lastly, attendance is being recorded for training credits. So please make sure you sign the attendance sheets at the entrances of the auditorium. I think everybody here has signed them. Enter your name and your organization that you represent in the chat box online. So without further ado, here's Gabriel Lotto.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So I'm going to go back to Zoom and share my screen to make sure that's working. Okay, we're good? All right. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Gabriel Lotto. I'm an earthquake scientist at the University of Washington, and I try not to be mostly in the lab coat on a computer, but I am trying to talk to communities about preparedness, about what you can do in practical terms, what we know the science tells us about earthquakes in Washington, and then what are some new systems and technologies, specifically Shake Alert, which you see on the screen at the top there, that give us an opportunity to respond before shaking starts, which is a totally new thing in America. So today we're going to cover some basics about the earthquake hazards in Washington. I'm going to try to convince you that, yes, this is something you should take seriously, you should care about. Not the only thing you care about here, especially in a hospital, but there's it's one of the many things that you can consider, and it's better to think about it before the earthquake happens. So why do we have earthquakes, and what kind of earthquakes do we have here? And then right now, when earthquake is happening, let's say we're here in this auditorium, we're here in the hospital, you're at home on Zoom. What do you do? What do you do right now to protect yourself? Immediate actions. And then preparing for earthquakes broadly. What kind of drills can we do? What kind of things can we do if you're an emergency manager, or if you're in any other role, public safety, or just personally, if you're a doctor or a nurse, what can you do? What can you do to protect yourself? And one of those things is the Shake Alert earthquake early warning system. So I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about that because that's where a lot of my funding comes from. But that's just one part of the puzzle. After that, we'll just open it to questions and answer. Don't be shy about asking any questions. We're a pretty intimate group here, at least in person. So I think we can just keep it pretty informal once we get to that section. If you have a question during the presentation, Cassidy may interrupt me. Feel free to type it into the chat or raise a hand, and we'll get to that. So first, why do we have earthquakes in Washington? Well, you all know about plate tectonics. It's actually it's old hat by now, but it's a fairly new scientific concept. It's only been understood for a few decades, actually. Before the 1960s, we really weren't sure what the major forces driving where earthquakes were happening and why they were happening there. But now we have a pretty good sense. And what we have here on screen is the so-called Ring of Fire. This is the Pacific Ocean and the continents on the east and west of the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is one giant plate, and it's actually expanding from the middle, and it's pushing out in all directions. And so anywhere you look around the edge of the Pacific Ocean, you have the Pacific plate ducking or subducting under these other plates. So on the west side of this map, you have Japan and East Asia, and we all know that's a hot spot for earthquakes in the world. Up north, we have Alaska, and to the east, we have the North American plate. And I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. Here it is. You see my cursor. We have this little plate here, which is actually the plate that lives closest to us, which is called the Juan de Fuca plate. Here's the Pacific plate, here's the North American plate, and we're kind of scrunched up around here. Now let's zoom in a little bit. That's the big picture. Plates move against each other, and when they move, earthquakes happen on faults. But why specifically do we have faults here the way we do? This is just a little simulation of earthquakes, or not of earthquakes, but of the plate tectonics action that is happening where we are. So down south in this map, you have California being pushed kind of up laterally, side to side motion from the San Andreas fault system down here. That's a different kind of fault than we have. The San Andreas has this side to side motion, this strike slip motion, we call it in earthquake lingo. That's kind of pushing up north. It's pushing the block of California up north to where we are. And then we have the Cascadia subduction zone, which is where the Juan de Fuca plate pushes east underneath the North American plate around where we are. That stretches from the northern part of California to the southern part of Canada. So you have this east-west squishing motion and this north-south squishing motion. And all that means that up here, by the time you get to the southern part of Canada, the western part of Washington, you get this almost accordion-like squishing, compressing. And so here we have a variety of interesting earthquake activity that happens as a result of that. If we look at the actual map of earthquakes that we've had historically in recent times, you see a lot of different things. So I'm going to talk us through this figure a little bit. So obviously we have a map of Washington with some of Oregon and some of Canada up here. And there's three major types of earthquakes that are caused by this overall plate tectonic motion. So the one that everyone is now aware of is the so-called big one, the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. The last one of those happened in the year 1700. And we know that from a combination of oral tradition from Native American tribes who were in this area. This was before Western settlers or with anyone with kind of written records were living in Washington. And we also have that confirmed by scientists from Japan. How do they know about an earthquake that happened here in Japan? Well, there was a tsunami that spread all across the Pacific Ocean. And when we're talking about this size earthquake, a magnitude 9, that happens underneath the ocean, well, that's going to generate a tsunami because it's when you have one plate going underneath another, you have this sense of up-down motion. And when the earthquake snaps, that North American plate, the upper plate kind of snaps back, pushing up the ocean and creating a tsunami. And a tsunami that's big enough that can travel as far as Japan and be recorded outside of the normal tidal action that you would see there. So in Japan, it was known as an orphan tsunami because there was a tsunami, but no earthquake. We're used to having an earthquake and then a tsunami. That's much more common in Japan than here. Anyway, that's the big one. It happens probably every 300 to 500 years. All right. So the last one was 1700. So you do the math. We're 2023. We're in that range where it could happen today or it could happen in 200 years. And neither of them would be surprising. But we should plan as if it could happen today. That would not be weird. So that's the biggest threat that can face us. That happens offshore. In an earthquake like that, we would experience here in Renton, we would experience probably several minutes of shaking. We'll talk more about what it's like to be in an earthquake in a few minutes, but that's the type of thing we're thinking about, okay? The second type of earthquake on this map is this purple color, okay? And those are pictured here down at depth. They're labeled as deep earthquakes or deep Juan de Fuca plate earthquakes. Remember, Juan de Fuca is the small tectonic plate near us. And they're also projected on the surface of the map up here. So these are the same three earthquakes. Here are their projections, their epicenters at the surface when up here. And you can notice that they tend to be associated with Western Washington, with the area under the Puget Sound and the surrounding region. These are the most common earthquakes that are going to happen in Washington. Was anyone here for the January 2001 Nisqually earthquake? Right. So, you might have a memory of what that was like. And these earthquakes are the most regular, the most common, and the most consistent of the earthquakes that we could experience here. We're going to get these every 30 to 50 years. They're going to be, if you tell me that a magnitude 7 earthquake happens or a magnitude 6.5 earthquake happened today in Washington, I would say, okay, it's probably one of these deeper earthquakes. So because it's a deeper earthquake, that means that the intensity is not going to be felt as strongly right at the surface. It's going to be felt over a wider area less strongly. So you might feel it pretty similar here as in Seattle, as in even as far as Portland or Ellensburg or Wenatchee. You feel it over the whole, a broad region. And typically these earthquakes cause a decent amount of infrastructure damage. They can topple some very unlucky buildings. They will injure or even kill a few people. But those are usually kind of these kind of freak accidents, like like a building facade falling on someone who happens to be right outside, or a really unlucky person under a heavy piece of furniture. This is the Nisqually earthquake. Very few people were killed. I believe it's 1 or 2 or something like that, or maybe no one. These are the most common earthquakes. So these are something that remind us that big earthquakes can happen, and you can get unlucky. You could have interruptions to your business, interruptions to your community. It's not the worst thing. The last type of earthquake here are all these little earthquakes in blue, crustal fault earthquakes. So you see them on the map. There was, in Canada in 1918, 1946 on Vancouver Island, in Eniat, Chelan in 1872. That was one of the biggest earthquakes in recorded history in the state of Washington. There's a state line earthquake in 1936, 1993 Scotts Mills. And then back in the year 900 on the Seattle Fault, we think there was an earthquake there. Now, the thing about crustal faults is these are the earthquakes that are really hard to get a grip on, because when you have this big picture tectonic motion pushing continental plates together, we have a good understanding of the largest possible earthquakes. Okay, those are really easy to look back in history and see exactly when they happened, because they leave a lot of evidence. They leave tsunami deposits, liquefaction evidence all over. And so it's easy it's fairly easy. I say it's easy, but I don't go out in the field and dig in the mud. It's fairly easy to know when these earthquakes have happened, and we can get a good understanding. The big Cascadia earthquakes happen every 300 to 500 years. But these local crustal fault earthquakes, there's crustal faults all over the place. Okay, some of them are alive, some of them are ancient artifacts of earthquakes from millions or thousands of years ago. And for any given fault, it's hard to have a sense of when it's going to go off. It could be every 1,000 years for any one fault, right? So the Seattle fault might not go off again for another hundreds or thousands of years, and we don't have a good sense of when it'll happen. However, the Seattle fault is not the only crustal fault in the region. There's tons of these similar faults lined up in this kind of northwest-southeast pattern, with some side-to-side motion and some up and down motion. And all of these faults together accommodate this big picture tectonic motion, right? So we don't know if the next earthquake is going to happen on the Seattle Fault, or the Whidbey Island Fault, or any of these other faults that run through this region. And that's what makes them tricky to understand. So our best estimate of how often these kind of earthquakes will happen. So if you look at the next 50 years, what are the odds that these three types of earthquakes will happen? We think there's about a 15% chance that the big Cascadia subduction zone earthquake will happen in the next 50 years. About a 15% chance. So think about that in terms of your other hazards that could happen. So then if you look at these deeper earthquakes, the Juan de Fuca plate earthquakes, the most recent one was 2001, we are about 85% chance of having one in the next 50 years. That's quite likely. You are, if you live here long enough, you are very, very, very likely to experience one or more of these Nisqually type earthquakes. And then finally, crustal faults. Again, it's really almost impossible to know at any given fault when it's going to go off. But the idea of having one of these major crustal faults happening in the Puget Sound area is also about 15% chance over the next 50 years. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on that crustal fault hazard because I think it's one that we don't really know about. We've been through the Nisqually one. We all have read about the Cascadia one. But in some ways, the crustal faults can be the most damaging because instead of affecting a really large region with pretty strong shaking, they're going to affect a smaller region with very, very strong shaking. And they happen right up close to the surface. They could cut through your backyard or through your railroad tracks. And they'll cause a lot of intense damage nearby. This is just a simulation of one of these faults, the Devil's Mountain fault. There's various simulations of these on the U.S. Geological Survey website. And the point is not to say that this is something to be taken literally, but just that this kind of strong shaking could happen really anywhere along in our region here. There's, as you can see, there's faults all over the Puget Sound. And again, it's not the most likely thing to happen, but it's quite possible that one of these will go off. Let's move ahead. So when we sum it all up, what we care about is not just the underlying hazard. What does the geology tell us? What does the earth science tell us? But what does that mean for us? What is the risk? And so in the world of emergency management or resilience, or we think about risk as being the combination of the hazard, the underlying thing that could go wrong, and the exposure, so where people live. And when you add that up in this region, well, we have a large and growing population. We have tons of people everywhere, and we have pretty high hazard. And so adding up that hazard and that exposure, the population who can experience that, you end up with a high level of risk. And so in a hospital setting or at a medical center like this, we need to think about risk, not just for the people here in the building, but the whole community. This is a place that needs to be up and running after a big earthquake. So we need to be ready, more ready than anyone else if we're in a medical center like this that serves a big community. This is where we can start thinking about, what can we do to protect ourselves, whether you're part of the hospital, whether you're part of Valley Medical, or whether you're in the community. So let's just have a little break. Are there any questions in the chat yet?
Nothing yet.
Okay, anything from the folks here? Anything that you've thought of or wondering about? Yeah.
Actually, Gabriel, I'm kind of curious about how volcanism plays a factor into earthquakes. Is there any correlation or relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in case you didn't hear online, the question is, what does volcanism in Washington have to do with earthquakes? How do they interact? Volcanoes are also part of the same big picture tectonic story. It's the same motion of the Juan de Fuca plate pushing under the North American plate that creates earthquakes, but it also creates melt magma that comes up in the form of these volcanoes. So, in this map, you see what I didn't talk about before, are these black triangles, and all of these represent the Cascade volcanoes that also help accommodate some of the motion of the tectonic plates. So how related are these to the earthquakes themselves? They are part of the same process, but earthquakes are generally not going to trigger volcanic eruptions. Um, Volcanic eruptions are associated with lots of little earthquakes, but it's not the earthquakes that do damage. It's the volcano erupting, and it's the ash flows, the pyroclastic flows, the lahars that injure people and do damage. Last thing to say about that is the earthquakes are actually a great clue to know when a volcano is restless. So the volcano scientists at the Cascade Volcano Observatory are using our earthquake data to help understand the hazard at all of these volcanoes. So with earthquakes, you don't have a good idea of when they're about to come in the days and months ahead. Volcanoes, you do. If there's a volcano that's about to erupt, we're going to have a good chance of knowing about it beforehand. Okay. Question.
So we have a question from Evan with the city of Sumner. And his question is, what earthquake type does the most damage to underground infrastructure, such as sewer water systems?
Okay, so I'm not sure if the people could hear that from your computer, but the question is, what kind of earthquake does the most severe damage to underground systems, water and sewers, and the like? Any earthquake that produces kind of strong shaking. And I'm not an expert as specifically, I don't know specifically the types of pipes or kind of infrastructure that would be used at Sumner or anywhere else. But so, strong shaking is going to be bad no matter what kind of earthquake it's from. If you have a local earthquake, like one of these crustal fault earthquakes, it's going to produce a lot of strong local shaking. What also matters at the next level of detail is the frequency of shaking. So frequency being the waves can kind of go in a kind of slow, waving, relaxed motion, or they can be kind of intense. That's the frequency. How fast does a point go back and forth? And different earthquakes will produce different frequencies, and then different infrastructure will respond to different frequencies. Okay. Let's continue. Now, what am I doing here? What does my organization do? Joel mentioned that I'm with the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. We are the official monitoring organization for earthquakes in Washington and Oregon. So our job is to keep track of everything that's happening, all the ground motion that's happening. So we have seismic sensors all over Washington and Oregon. Some of them look like this. They're in picturesque locations on mountaintops, or they're in farmers' fields, or they're in the utility closet at a fire station, beautiful locations. This is one of the more beautiful ones. And all they are essentially is a power source. So in this case, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and our power source is a solar panel. There's a little box that's anchored to the ground or to the floor, depending on where you are. And there's a little kind of motion detector. It's kind of what you think of a seismometer. It's not a pen on paper, but it's a digital version of that same thing you imagine. And when the ground moves at all, whether that's from an earthquake or a mining explosion or a road blast or a car driving by or people jumping up and down, you can do this experiment. If you go to one of these stations, if you find it, jump up and down and go look at the data later, you'll see it. They're very sensitive instruments, and they're all over the place. This is our map of stations in Washington and Oregon. You'll see, don't even worry about the different colors. They represent the different kinds of stations. But all of these dots, 716, and probably more by the time we're speaking, kind of always adding new stations and upgrading old ones. All of these contribute to our understanding of earthquakes. So I mentioned the example of jumping up and down or a truck going past. So how do we know that that's not an earthquake? Well, if it's only on one station, it's not an earthquake. If it's the same pattern in the right timing in a bunch of stations that expand out in a circle, well, that's how we know it's a seismic wave and not some other noise. And so there's some automatic processes that do the filtering, and then some people who actually are experts at knowing what kind of motion is related to an earthquake and what kind of isn't. We've been doing this at the University of Washington, and now also in collaboration with the University of Oregon, since the 70s. So it's been 40 plus years now. And this is our job. So it's not just the detection, but more and more it's about public communication, making this available on the internet. Anyone who's curious can go to our website, pnsn.org, and look up the station closest to you. Look at the data it's producing right now. See what you see. I mean, make some observations. Why is it that some stations tend to be really kind of a lot of little motion during the day and not at night? You could make your hypothesis about that. So this is what we're here to do. We are your experts. We really, not just myself, of course, but a whole team of scientists who've been doing this for a long time. We are happy to talk to you about your hazards, about any sort of activity near you that you might be curious about. We are your public resource. So let's move ahead and talk about what it's like to be an earthquake and what we can do about it. So first, I'm just curious, show of hands, who has been through an earthquake that they felt? Oh, okay, so everyone. That's awesome. So this might be redundant for you, but maybe it's different. And one thing we'll see is that different earthquakes act differently. So this is from a school in Alaska 2 years ago. Okay, so I've never been through an earthquake like this. And this is not as big as they come. This is a fairly moderate earthquake, especially by Alaska standards. This was a few years ago, and there happened to be a camera recording a lesson in a public school, and you got to see kind of what it's like. What do people do? And in this case, what do people do who are prepared for an earthquake? Because schools are a really useful place for this kind of thing, because every year, at least once a year, they do an earthquake drill at the Great Shakeout in October. In Alaska, they possibly do more earthquake drills than that. In this case, this is the perfect example of what to do in an earthquake. People started feeling it, and they didn't just start talking about, oh, what's that? They didn't run out of the room. No, they were prepared. Okay, they got under their desks and they dropped cover and hold on. They protected themselves. And in this earthquake, in this room, no one was injured. There wasn't any major damage. But you don't know that going into the earthquakes, right? So there's ceiling tiles, there's projectors, the lights went out for a second there. Other things we can observe just from that one little video, earthquakes, it's not the same shaking at all times, right? It starts out a little slower, gets more intense. There's waves, right? Sometimes it's really intense, then it slows down and it gets more intense. You could have aftershocks after this. So, a couple of general points. Earthquakes the shaking can last a few seconds or it can last several minutes, depending on the size of the earthquake and the kind of shaking it produces. You might hear a loud noise from the initial shock wave of the earthquake, or just loud noises from clattering of infrastructure, furniture, everything around you moving around, building components. So it can feel like the earthquake itself can feel like a single pulse, kind of like a punch, followed by some other stuff, or it could just be what you saw in that video, which is fairly moderate or violent shaking, kind of rapid shaking, high frequency shaking, or it can feel slower. So many people, especially further away from the Nisqually earthquake, felt it as this kind of rolling motion. You said, wait, am I in a boat? No, I am in an earthquake. And the whole thing, the whole ground kind of is actually moving up and down in these longer period, lower frequency waves. So it can be lots of different things. in the United States, where we are in earthquake country, the way people get injured is not typically from buildings collapsing. It's mostly from people falling over while they're trying to move, objects falling on people, or kind of building facades, like I mentioned before. We have, despite the fact that we don't have a ton of felt earthquakes here in Washington, at least not recently, we have good building codes because we've known for decades that these earthquakes are a big deal here. Now, there are some buildings that are older that were built especially before the 1950s. Some of these are important buildings like schools, even hospitals, right? If you're in an unreinforced masonry building, a URM, typically a brick building, those are not going to be as earthquake ready unless they've been retrofitted afterward. However, most buildings, especially most newer, basically all newer buildings, you really don't have to worry about building collapse. What you have to worry about is non-structural hazards. I'm looking around the room. I see a large projector hanging from the ceiling. Now, if there's an earthquake happening, I'm going to try to move away from that projector. I won't just drop, cover, and hold on right there. So that brings me to, what do you do if you feel an earthquake? Well, if you learn one thing, what everyone wants you to know is drop, cover, hold on. So what does that mean? It means stop moving and protect yourself, okay? However that is best in the context where you are, right? So if you're here, I'm going to try to get away from things that I think could fall on me. I'm going to cover my head and neck, my vital organs, and just get into a position where I'm not trying to move around. I'm not trying to run out the door. That's where accidents happen. Of course, this is a really a too simple message, right? This is great if you learn one thing, drop, cover, hold on, that's good. But really, it's about situational awareness. It's about context. In a hospital, we have lots of people with access and functional needs, right? We don't all have the ability to get on the ground in 1 second and get under a nearby table, right? If you're using a cane or a walker or a wheelchair, well, those are different things. We don't expect you to drop your wheelchair and get on the ground. No, you have to think about the context. So you would lock the wheelchair if it has wheels. Lock anything with wheels. If you're rolling around some equipment with wheels here in a hospital, or you're in a bed that can move around, or you're in a laboratory, lock those wheels and then protect yourself. If you're in a bed, a lot of people are in beds in a hospital or at home. If an earthquake wakes you up at night, don't get out of bed to drop, cover, and hold on. A bed is a fairly safe place to be. You're covered in soft pillows and mattresses. And as long as there isn't a chandelier right above you, you're in a good situation. So turn over, cover your head and neck with the pillow, and protect yourself that way. Okay, that's the second level of detail, right? And what if you're outdoors? Now, if you're outdoors, you want to stay away from things that could fall on you, but you're in a pretty good situation, probably. Get away from buildings, get away from power lines if you can, but generally just, be in an open area. That's a great place to be outdoors. If you're driving, you start to feel shaking. It might take you a little longer to feel shaking if you're driving because you're already experiencing a lot of road noise and motion. But once you figure out there's an earthquake happening, pull over safely, put on the emergency brake, and just kind of cover your head and neck. Make sure that you're not putting yourself in extra danger. So I wouldn't pull over under a power line or under a bridge if I could avoid it. But just stop moving. Now, if you're near the coast, we obviously have a tsunami hazard here, and the earthquake is your best warning that a tsunami is coming. So ride out the earthquake in whatever way is best for that moment, right? And then get to high ground. Okay? Don't wait and see if there's a tsunami warning, because the tsunami warning system is not as fast as the earthquake itself. The earthquake is your tsunami warning. Okay. Now, if you went to school kind of a few decades ago, or kind of you've heard, this is what your mother did or your grandmother did, get in a doorway. No, right? That's outdated advice. It was probably never good advice to begin with. It was based on the idea that in certain kind of low quality building construction types, door frames might be a better, more sturdy area than other parts of the building. In the US, that's just not true. They are no more stable than any other part of the building. So do not take extra steps to get into a doorway, right? Just stay where you are. If you're in a doorway, that's fine, right? But just, it's not better than anywhere else, right? If you're in a hospital, right? Protect yourself before helping others. Make sure you can be in a safe position. You are the resource for your community that is going to kind of help with the recovery effort, right? So you need to be safe and able to work and respond to others who need help. It's like being on an airplane, right? Get yourself the mask before helping children, all right? Like I said before, lock wheels on beds, wheelchairs, any equipment that can be moved around. Encourage others, encourage your patients, encourage other staff to get low to the ground and protect themselves. And in terms of general advice, that's really all I'm going to say. Whatever job you are, if it's a hospital or elsewhere, you need to think, you're the expert of what you do. You're the expert of your environment. You know what's going to be more safe or less safe. You need to, it's worth thinking about in advance, but I can't give some kind of general expert. And this is just a quote here from a paper in Nature, which is one of the big science journals. Hospital systems are at the core of disaster resilience because they must provide timely critical healthcare services to communities during an emergency response. Like I said, you guys are the front line here. Now, what can we do to prepare ourselves for an earthquake before it's happening, right? This is a big deal. Now, it's about securing objects that present a falling or toppling hazard, furniture, equipment, refrigerator, bookshelves, copiers, computers, carts, art, cabinet. A lot of these solutions are really cheap, right? You buy a $5 strap from Home Depot, and you connect it to the fridge, you connect it to the wall, make sure it's a sturdy part of the wall, and you're set, right? All of these things will matter. Identify utility infrastructure, mapping utility shutoffs, making sure the right people are prepared to shut off utilities if there's a gas leak or something like that. Think about business continuity. So this isn't just for hospitals, it's for anywhere, but if you need to be active after an earthquake, well, think about what might happen around you. So it's not just some people will be injured during an earthquake, it's that roads will be damaged, utilities will not be as reliable, so water utilities, power might be out, and depending on the size of the earthquake, that could affect a small region or a whole state region, right? So if the Cascadia earthquake happens, you should expect to be somewhat self-sufficient for 2 weeks. So what do you need to do as a hospital in terms of water, in terms of paperwork, documentation, lack of internet connectivity, and be ready to act without what you're used to. Think about all that stuff. 2 weeks of supplies is what's recommended. Okay, think about communications, how you talk to people with and without the normal infrastructure like the internet that you're used to, cell phones. Maybe that'll be available, maybe not. Get your employees prepared, go through drills. I mentioned the Great Shakeout drill. And then I'll talk a little bit about the Shake Alert Earthquake Early Warning System up ahead, and that's a big thing that's fairly new. So I'll just play a short video.
The Earthquake Early Warning System is now active in California, Oregon, and Washington. The Shake Alert System detects earthquakes in 12 seconds.
Okay, so to summarize, this is the Shake Alert Earthquake Early Warning System is a product of both the federal government, the U.S. Geological Survey, and universities like the University of Washington. It's taxpayer funded, so it relies on these existing seismic networks, like the one I showed you the map of before. All of these seismic sensors, they're used to detect the earthquakes in real time and alert people through a variety of means. So the details of that are what I want to get into next here. First, a brief history. Like I said, this is pretty new. We first rolled out in California in 2019, then in Oregon and Washington in 2021. So at this point, right now, if there is a moderate earthquake in Washington that we are expected to feel, we will all feel our phones start going off from the wireless emergency alert system. So if you ever gotten an Amber Alert, everyone in the room around you gets an Amber Alert. It's one of the ways we deliver alerts is through that same wireless emergency alert system. So that would happen today. I also want to make, I want to get into some detail about how you actually can connect to Shake Alert at an organizational level. So I'll talk about what you can do as an individual with a cell phone, and then what you could do as a hospital or a government or a emergency management organization. So on the left hand is all of the data and algorithms side of Shake Alert. This is what we do at the universities and at the U.S. Geological Survey. We detect the earthquake, estimate how big it is, and post that information to a secure federal server, right? So at its core, Shake Alert is a piece of data that goes out in the internet. Then on the right side is how these alerts get into the public. The USGS doesn't deliver the alerts themselves. They rely on private and public sector partners to connect to our data servers and do something with it. And the doing something could be sending it through a cell phone, or it could be putting it through a PA system, or it could be automatically shutting a water valve or slowing a train. This is where the rubber meets the road, and this is where we look to partner with all the organizations in the community. So I'm hoping that for all of us online and in the room, if you actually want to get your organization connected to Shake Alert, and I can make a solid case for why that's better than just relying on cell phones at an organizational level. I would really love to talk to you after the fact. I've got some business cards up here, but I'll put my email up, and you can always reach out. This is my job to make Shake Alert work for people. But like I said, at its core, it's data. How does it get out into the world? Well, there's kind of these two pathways. One is the mass alerting to individuals on cell phones, and the other are these automated actions. So specifically, how do you make sure that you get Shake Alert on your cell phone? I mentioned already the last option here, the wireless emergency alert system. This is something that unless you have turned it off your phone, you will get a wireless emergency alert for an earthquake. It's great. The only thing right now is that we don't recommend that you only rely on wireless emergency alerts because it's a slower system than some of these others, right? It was originally built for alerts that it didn't matter whether they get out in seconds or minutes. But for earthquake alerts, they need to get out in seconds, right? So they really need to get out on the low end. The latencies can sometimes be a bit higher for wireless emergency alerts. So the whole, one thing I didn't say clearly before was that with Shake Alert, we detect the earthquake in a couple of seconds, and we deliver it to people in a couple of seconds. Now, how much warning time does that actually give you? It depends on where you are. But earthquakes travel quite quickly, but not as quickly as the speed of information. So if an earthquake starts in Seattle, for example, and we're here down in Renton, it's reasonable to get 10 to 20 seconds of warning time between when you get an alert, after all the processing happens, when you get an alert, and when you start to feel shaky. So it's not a ton of time. Now, if we're talking about the big Cascadia earthquake, that could start in Canada, or it could start in Oregon, or it could start offshore here. But that we're looking at more of a 30 seconds to a minute to 90 seconds kind of warning time. So that gives you a lot more time to act. All of this kind of factors into the how the latencies matter. When you're getting the data out there, it matters how quick you can get the data out to people's phones or into your own infrastructure systems. Okay, with that preamble, back to how do you get it on your phone. There's that WIA system. If you have an Android phone, it's built into the operating system for Android. It's not yet in iPhones, and I don't know if or when that will happen. I expect at some point, but it's hard to know who to, I don't deal with it. That's above my pay grade. Last thing is something that anyone could do with a smartphone. They can download the MyShake app. MyShake is the official app that delivers shake alert data in Washington. So whether you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you can also get the MyShake app. It's produced by University of California, Berkeley. They're one of our partners in developing the earthquake early warning system, so they're highly trusted. And this app has delivered millions of alerts in California for the most part, because that's where most of the earthquakes have happened since 2019. So very much encourage you to get that app, especially if you have an iPhone. If you have an Android phone, you might be satisfied with just the built-in operating system alerts. Okay, then that other half, getting this into organizations, right? We mentioned all of these possible things, but I encourage you to think, what if you have 10, 20, 30 seconds of warning before an earthquake happens? What would you do to protect people, to protect infrastructure? Cell phones are great for individuals, but there's lots of places where cell phones are not going to be good enough, and you really want mass alerting. And because at its core, Shake Alert, like I keep saying, is a piece of data, right? You can determine with your IT team, with your facilities team, what to do with that data, how to get it out over PA systems, over sirens, over computers, over speakers, over anything you already have in place for alerting. And then what are all these additional things that you really don't want to be moving during an earthquake? Trains, obviously. If you operate, if you're involved with a transit system, your bus drivers, you might send them radio messages, say, hey, earthquake, in 15 seconds, pull over. Passengers will be confused for 15 seconds. Then they'll be like, oh, that driver was a genius. That kind of stuff. Elevators, right? The city of Seattle has recently started stopping some of its elevators before an earthquake happens using Shake Alert. Starting generators for backup power, shutting off gas and water valves. That's one of the most common applications. Water utility systems, throttling water valves. Opening firehouse doors. In California earthquakes over the last several decades, there have been many situations where fire stations were not able to respond because power was out and their doors were closed. Which you think, that's crazy. Why would that happen? But it actually can be a big problem. And so if you automatically open the doors before power goes out, the risk, it's a fairly fault-tolerant action. If you do it and it turns out the earthquake wasn't a big deal, well, so what? Then you just close your garage doors. Actually connecting to the system is where we can have in-depth conversations. That's why I would encourage you to reach out to me. But your basic options, right, are two options. One, signing a license agreement with the United States Geological Survey, who manages the Shake Alert data, and getting access to that data for free. That will require some of your own IT staff to figure out solutions. The other option is to work with a vendor. There are a series of licensed partners who work with USGS, who are experts and kind of taking the data and doing something with it. They literally will have a box that connects to your PA system and plays an audible alert if there's an earthquake that's happening. So they all have different pricing models, and I'm not going to get into too much detail. If you go with that option with the vendor, it can be much easier to get started. We try to be, we're totally neutral about which vendor. From my perspective, I'm in the public sector. I'm representing all of them and none of them in some ways. I mean, I just want people to get connected however is easiest for them. And there's lots of really good people we work with in this space. All of those vendors have to meet fairly strict requirements for delivering things on time. So, I mean, we really trust them, we really vet them. And the other option, as I mentioned, connecting to it yourself, right? And you would, of course, have to follow those same latency guidelines and technical requirements, but you would have usually more customization. And, as I said, the data itself is free. It's taxpayer funded, right? So both of these options can be really good. I know I'm nearing the end of my time here, so I want to run through a couple of concrete examples. So this is the Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Southern California. This is a major medical center. At any given day, there could be 25,000 people working, being patients or visiting to this hospital campus. They've been using Shake Alert for a while. They happened to go through one of these vendors that connected Shake Alert audible messages through the PA system and through handheld radios, because they had several buildings that were not accessible to their centralized PA system, people outside in different spaces, but those people had handheld radios. And so you can connect this same message into whatever communications platforms you already use. Recently, there was a magnitude 5 point something earthquake in Southern California. These guys at Cedars-Sinai got an alert. Everyone felt like, it didn't cause any damage. It's only a magnitude 5, and they're used to that in California. But this lets people know, yeah, we are watching out for you, and we're, not just the staff, but the patients and visitors as well. Know that there's something in place protecting them. Another example, very local, downtown Seattle, the Allen Institute is a research facility. They very quickly and easily became a partner of their own. So they didn't go with a vendor. They said, we have smart IT people. We can figure this out really quickly. And in about a week, they set it up so that they imported the data into their systems. And then it was just a matter of getting it out onto desktop computers. Depending on where the computer is, they send a different message, right? You can totally customize this. At its core, it's just data. So it tells you where the earthquake is, what you're going to feel. So they have staff working in labs that are more dangerous than others. So in the dangerous lab environments, they say, okay, you have time to get out of this room and then protect yourself. For their employees who are just at regular office desks and open floor plans, just protect yourself where you are. They're totally customizing it. Water utilities example. This is Grants Pass, Oregon. We've had a ton of uptake of water utilities in Washington and Oregon. They typically choose to go through vendors, although some of them have done it all on their own, where they are doing things like throttling water valves. So in case a pipe breaks during an earthquake, the rate of water loss is really low, rather than a kind of gushing of a whole reservoir of water, causing floods, causing lack of water, which is vitally needed after an earthquake, right? Another water utility use case that is pretty common is shutting off pumping valves. So often these are gravity-fed water systems. So you're occasionally pumping water up to a tower that's feeding the rest of the system. And those pumps aren't going all the time. But if they are going during an earthquake, you want to stop those pumps from moving. These are big, heavy equipments, and shaking for anything that's moving can be especially damaged. So if you're moving machinery and then you shake it, it acts as a gyroscope. It can tear itself apart, and that's a big problem. So the cost-benefit analyses that have been done for the water utility sector are super clear. I mean, you get a great return on investment for doing something like this. Last I'll mention, does anyone have kids in schools? Does anyone know any children in schools? Well, this is an obvious case where not everyone has a cell phone, but every school has a PA system. It's a really easy technical setup, and it's so easy to just get connected to PA systems, build this into your earthquake drills, make it the safest place you could possibly be during an earthquake, because you have highly prepared people in a reasonably safe environment and earthquake early warning. This is something that many schools are starting to do, but there is a bit of kind of startup funding that we at the PNSN actually can offer schools. So if you're interested, if you know anyone who works in school administration, or if you're involved with the local PTA or anything, there's lots of opportunities. I'd be happy to talk to you about how to get connected and even some funding possibilities. This is our neighbors to the north in Stanwood, Camino. They were one of the first schools in the country actually to get connected to the system. But this is something you can do today. I would love to talk to you more about this, as I said, and I've left very little time here for a question, but I'd be available if you have time. I would love to field any questions. So with that, is there anything in the audience here? Yes.
Do you have seismic stations posted near dams, including Mud Mountain?
So the question is, do we have seismic stations posted near dams, including Mud Mountain? I don't know about Mud Mountain specifically, but generally, yes, we have seismic stations all over the place. So your chances are you're within 10 or 20 kilometers of a seismic station. Now, is there one at dams at that dam specifically? I don't know, but we can come up afterwards and look at a map, and we could see if it's there. All that's posted online.
Will the loss of glacial mass on our volcanoes present a greater hazard for quakes?
So yeah, it's a great question. Will the loss of glacial mass on our volcanoes present a greater risk of earthquakes? Probably a very small, but yes, that is possible, right? Because I think what you're getting at is that, you know, when you change the weight of stuff on top of the earth, that changes the pressure on the faults, that changes the forces that cause earthquakes. So there are cases we know about, kind of hydrofracking or wastewater disposal or emptying a big reservoir. All over the world, there are cases where it seems like earthquakes are associated with changes in mass of stuff on top. In the case of the glaciers on the volcanoes, you know, it depends on how big that mass is. Is it enough of a change? Is it a large enough, quick enough change to change the earthquake risk? Maybe, maybe not. Anything online? No?
Nothing online. I do have one comment though. Thank you, Gabriel, for the great presentation. And that is also from Alex McGuire here at VMC.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, well, definitely. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining us today. Thank you for that informative presentation. He'll be here for a short time afterwards to field any questions that you may have that you're not comfortable asking in front of the audience here. And we'd also like to thank our greater community members who are here and online. Thank you for your continued support of Valley Medical Center's healthcare initiatives. And once again, thanks for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Fantastic. That was just amazing.